Okay, Boker Tov. So today's daf is daf Tes, and we pick up at the bottom of Cheramut Bet, and we are at the two dots, Gufa. Okay, so we finally worked through why I need a pasuk. Oh, thank you. Why I need a pasuk to teach me that, what do you call it? That there's no yibum in a case of erva. Because basically I would have tried to have learned it out one way or another from Eshesach, because already Yibum overrides that aspect of Erva, and that's why you needed the pasuk of Aleha to put the case of wife's sister in it in a Yibum context. That was one drasha, and the other drasha was Rebbe's, which was less clear, more was being read into the pasuk, which was from Vilakavi B'ma. Only she and not somebody else, indicating that there are cases of yibum where it will not apply, where there is where there's somebody where the mitzvah cannot be done, a case of erva or a case of tsaras erva. And the other really important point is that the Gemara says once you're introducing an idea of tsaras erva, you could have a reasonable assumption that the idea of tsara applies in general, even not in a case of yibum. A man dies, I can't marry one of his wives because she's forbidden to me. She's an erva. Maybe the other one is also forbidden, tsaras erva. So there had to be a very clear emphasis that tsaras erva is only in the context of yibum. And the logic is, since there's no mitzvah yibum to the co-wife of an erva, then she becomes forbidden on the basis of Eishes Ach. At least that seems to be the simplest explanation. Okay, so now we pick up from the two dots to look at Rebbe's drasha based on Vilakavi B'ma, Gufa. So it's about 15 lines from the bottom on Cheramut Bet. Gufa, Rebbe Omer, Vilakach, Vilakcha. It could have said Vilakach, although it really couldn't have, but okay. And it says Vilakcha, and it could have said V'yabam or V'yibam, and it says V'yibma. Le'asur tzarot v'arayot. Okay, to say that not only she is there a mitzvah of yibum, not somebody else, not an erva, and not a tsaras erva. The Gemara before us said, Rava said erva we could take for granted, but not also a tsaras erva. So the Gemara says, midi tsaras ksiva. First of all, how do you get the idea of tsaras into this pasuk? Where do you see that in the pasuk? Va'od tsaras militzrur. Nafka. The Gemara really doesn't want to give up the earlier drasha. It's so good. It's got the word litzror in the pasuk. It's talking about an erva. It's talking about wife's sister. So that should be our pasuk. How are you going to get it out of this pasuk? So the Gemara says, latzur. So litzror nafka. So latzur mafikle Rebbe Shimon. No, latzur. Rebbe needs that drasha for litzror to tell you something else. Sarah. And as far as 1 minute. Sarah, oh, not hachad. If you look at that, heichaksiva, and as opposed to, so that's question number one. What do we do with litzror? We have a different drasha. We're going to talk about what that drasha is in a minute, okay? And in terms of, well, actually, no, Rashi, we don't talk about that drasha here. Rashi just refers to it. Let me just quickly review the Rashi 1 minute. Okay, so the idea there is, actually we're going to see a lot of this in a little bit, is the case of the following. Two brothers are married to two sisters, okay? And so Reuven and Shimon are married to Rachel and Leah, okay? Reuven and Shimon both die. Now Levi has a mitzvah yibum, okay? Now you would say, okay, Levi is not forbidden on either Rachel or Leah, right? Let him choose which one he wants to do yibum on. He can't do yibum with both because then they'll be wife's sister. But he could do yibum with one. But Rabbi Shimon says he can't do yibum. You know why he can't do yibum? Because since he has an obligation to do yibum to both Rachel and Leah, therefore that's considered zika, right? A quasi connection, some element of the dead brother's marriage continues, and that the understanding of zika is there's some remnant of the dead brother's marriage that now continues with the live brother, and when yibum is done, then it fully manifests and becomes a full marriage. That's a way of understanding how yibum works. It actualizes that potential. That's called zika. So he now has a zika to both of these women. If he does yibum with one, if he does yibum with Rachel, then he is now married to Achot, not Ishto, but Achot Zikukaso, the sister of the other of Leah, who he has a Zika to. You sort of see that problem. So if you see Zika as a quasi kiddushin, so to do yibum with one makes him fully married to the sister of the other who he is zakuk to. Okay, and that is a problem. Okay, so Rabbi Shimon gets that. So if you take a look at Rashi, he says the following: Rabbi Shimon, it's right near the Hagos Habach on the left-hand margin. Perik Arba Achim, Gimel Achim, Shnai Mehem Nosim Shtei Achayot. So Reuven and Shimon are married to Rachel and Leah. Oh, Isha Bitav, fine. Umeis Benaf Lufnei Shlishi, and now Levi has a mitzvah yibum on Rachel and on Leah from different brothers.
Is the man who died first?
No, we'll talk about that later. Harei Luchotzot Lo Miyamot Lifti Sheshem Zukukas Lo Mikudei Shemnei Achiv Achav V'Zika Have K'Tzas Kiddushin. Okay, so he has a zika that's quasi kiddushin. V'imiyabim chadminayu kanasiv achos zikukaso b'chayeha. The zikukaso have kiishto. Okay, so that's the problem. Of a chalitza boy, and then he has to do chalitza. And if you skip about 4 lines, but yalif taima militzror b'shash nasu tsarot zulazu. When the 2 different yibums yevamaz are tsarot are sort of competing one another. Okay, kigon hacha denasu hachayot sarot zulazu bezika lo yelecha lekuchin afilu ba'achas mehen. You can't even do it. So he thinks that this is a biblical idea. So that's what he does with litzror. So Rabbi, who does not learn out the idea of the normal case of a tsaras erva from litzror, but litzror is such a good word. It talks about tsaras. What are we going to do with it? Oh, we do it for a special case, not a normal tsaras erva. We do it for a case of 2 separate mitzvah yibums from 2 separate brothers, where the 2 women are somewhat tsaras to one another, are an erva to each other. Okay, and that creates a problem, because if you actualize the marriage with one, you create a quasi erva, you're over, because of the other one. Okay, so that's what he does with litzror, and we'll see plenty of that a little bit later today. Okay, that idea of achos zikukaso. So now, what does he do with? How does he read tsara into the verse of v'lakha v'lakha? Where do you get an idea of tsara from that pasuk? Right. So now it says tsara hecha ksiva, back to the Gemara, and where is tsara written? So that's what So litzror, he does another drasha. Now, how does he read tsara into the pasuk of v'lakha? Because it says v'lakach, and it could have said v'lakach, and it says v'lakcha. So hachi kamar. Here's how we're going to read it into the pasuk. In kain lemakra v'lakach. My v'lakcha. What does v'lakcha tell you by the mitzvah of yibum? Kohecha deika trei lekuchim. That means that in a case where there are 2 marriages that could happen, meaning that there's a mitzvah of yibum and there are 2 wives, there's a choice, right? V'lakcha suggests v'lakcha hi v'lo acher, right? V'lakcha suggests this one, not that one. So if there's a choosing this one, not that one, it's only to be choice if there are 2. If there are 2 to choose from. So already, because of the pasuk specifies, shall take her implied and not the other, or you don't have to take the other, or whatever. That means that there are 2 wives now, or 2 women to do yibum to. Okay, at least 2. Fine. So it's a case where the brother was married to 2 wives. Okay, that's point number 1. So there are 2 wives now. Now here's what v'lakha is telling you. That v'lakha means that as long as you can take either one of them, you're good. Okay. If you're in a position where you could be lokeach this one, v'lakha, or you could be lokeach that one, v'lakha, sure, you're good. Then there's a mitzvah yibum. V'ilo, but if you can't do likuchin with either one, travayu asirin, they're both forbidden. So that's how he gets the idea of tsara into the pasuk. Remember, we said yesterday that there's no mitzvahs of yibum by erva we take for granted. So if we take it for granted, then the pasuk here is coming and saying, you have to be in a position that there are 2 women. When there are 2 women, you can choose to take one of them. If you cannot choose to take either one, because one of them is an erva, then there's no mitzvah yibum at all. Okay, still reading the line into the pasuk, but maybe a little bit more understandable. Okay, and now what is Vayibma telling me? Like we said before, the mitzvah, the idea of tsara creates a problem only in the context of yibum. That's where co-wife of an erva is an issue. In a normal case, co-wife of an erva is not a problem. That's what he does with it. Fine. Now he got his drasha. Now what we're going to get to today is the normal type of a thing that the Gemara often does, which is this person learns it from this pasuk, this person learns it from that pasuk. What do you do with each other's psukim? So he already told me what Rabbi did with litzror. He learned this idea of 2 separate yibums from 2 separate brothers, and when they're sisters and so on, you can't do it with either one. The zika is achos zukukasa. That's what he did with the rabbi's pasuk of litzruah. Now we're going to have to figure out what the rabbis do with Rebbe's pasuk of vilakha, why it needed the extra hey, v'yibma, why it needed to specify her and not another one. And it's going to go back and forth saying, what do you do with this pasuk? Well, then how does he learn it out? What does he do with that pasuk? How does he learn it out and figure the whole thing out? I still remember way back many years when I was like teaching a shir about this, and like the Gemara, because we're going to see, the Gemara is going to go back and forth. What do you do with his pasuk? What do you do with his pasuk? What do you do with his pasuk? So I said, like, now the Gemara is just working out the math. And I had like a mathematician in the room, and she was very offended. She said, math? She said, that's not math, that's accounting. So, what? No, it's not even that, it's accounting. Yes.
In a normal case of you, let's say a brother dies, has two wives,
yeah,
no children, and there are two other brothers left, right?
Right.
So one brother takes one of them, doesn't take both.
Right.
Does the other brother
No.
have the other one, or
No.
is it the name of it?
No. Bayis echad hu bona ve'eno bona shnei batim. The mitzvah of Yibum is done with one woman and then it stops.
So
Okay.
no matter how many brothers there are, just
Correct.
one.
Correct.
This
Okay.
structure of this sugi is going to be like the sugi in brachot.
Right.
Bahaya.
Exactly. So let's take a look. So we're going to leave the world of Yibum for a while to deal with psukim, and then we're going to get back to a very intense application of Yibum. So let's take a look. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. So v'rabbanan hay v'lakcha mayavgile. What did they do with the hay of v'lakcha, which is seen here as being extra? Now this is a very important conceptual idea. What Vilakha is telling you is two things. Number one is that once Yibum is done, it's like likuchim. It's like marriage. What's the chiddush of that? Two important chidushim. Number one is after Yibum is done, there can be divorce. He can give her a get. You might have thought that this is permanent now. There's a mitzvah of Yibum, maybe it's permanent. Here's even a bigger chiddush. After he divorces her, if she doesn't marry another man, he can remarry her. She does not revert to being achos ishto. So even though he did the mitzvah of Yibum in a way that there was closure on that, not only was the original act done, we spoke about that the other day. You know, the Gemara even, you might have thought that once the first act of sex is done, they can't continue to have sex. She remains achos ishto. But no, we don't say that. Fine, but maybe that's for the duration of the marriage. Maybe once there's closure on that and then there was a divorce, maybe then she reverts. No, he can go ahead and remarry her. And that's what Vilakha is saying, is once the mitzvah of Yibum is done, we look at this as a normal kiddushin, as a normal marriage. There can be a get and there can even be a remarriage. Okay? Shemigar shabeget umachzira. So that's very important. Vibma. Now, what do you do with the extra hey? You should be miyabim her. They could have said viyabam, apparently. Al karcha. That's going to be the very whatever, sort of morally challenging discussion, but that the act of Yibum can be done even against her will. It's not allowed, but if he forced himself on her, and even if she did not want to become his wife, the act of Yibum, as opposed to Kiddushin has to be with Birsona, right? The woman has to agree to it, but here the concept is because the Zika transfers, there's already a quasi-Kiddushin in place. And therefore, the act of sex just actualizes the potential of what's already there. And therefore, even if there was no intention, not only if he forced her, even if he didn't realize she was his sister-in-law, right? He just thought he was sleeping with some other woman. There was no intention of Yibum. Or the Gemara even has a more absurd case where he falls off a roof and accidentally has sex with her. We'll see that. That's always a case that everybody likes having a good laugh off. Right? What? Anyway, the point is nobody's intention matters. So the idea is it's not specifically about Baal Korcha, it's even Baal Korcho, because the idea is that the Zika, the marriage is already potentially there, it's waiting to be actualized, and once there's an act of sex, which is of course, understood as like the on the ground facts of what marriage is, that there can be sex outside of marriage, but it's, sort of like why they move from Kiddushin to Nisuin, the living together is seen as the actualization of it, then that creates the Yibum, even if nobody was intending it. Okay, and that's learned out from this sense of somehow this extra hay communicates this idea that even Baal Korcha. Okay, again, that'll be very challenging, obviously, because the whole issue is of rape, but it's not only Al Korcha, it's even Al Korcha. As I said, it's broader than that.
Doesn't usually work, right?
Right, exactly. You normally need kavana. Here you do not. So somehow that's learned out from the extra hay. Okay, for Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina. So where does Rabbi now get these ideas from? Since he learns out from Lakav Yidma to tell me about Sarah. So mili isha nafka. It says v'lakacha lo li isha, for a wife. So he says what? She says, oh no, li isha, not mapike, for a wife. Okay, so that says it has normal status of wife. Normal status of wife, divorce and remarry, like we said before. Okay, Now, that's the idea that there can be divorce and remarriage. How about the idea of al kocha? Miyavama yavo aleha nafka. The brother-in-law shall come onto her, or enter into her, to be more sort of literal. So that again means that somehow the way it just describes it seems like it'll happen regardless. It's going to happen. So somehow, even if it happens against her intention, it's going to be valid. Rabbi hi aleha my avi, and particularly learn from the word aleha. So that's how. That's what he does with those psukim. That's how everybody learns out everybody else's halacha. Yes.
According to the way you're conceptualizing it, then chalitza is a kind of gerushin.
Yes, and which is why a kohen is usher to a chalutza, because it's a type of a grusha. Now, although the Bavli consistently says that chalutza is a derabanan, there's actually a lot of sugyot and a lot of mishnah, whatever, make it sound like chalutza might even have been understood by some to have been a d'oraisa. So that is correct. Chalitza is a type of a gerushin. Okay, so now the Gemara says, okay, so now we figured out what do the rabbis do with lakcha v'yibma, the extra hay. Now we have to say, what does Rebbe do with the pasuk of the rabbis? Because remember, the rabbis here, the Rabbanan said, where do you know Saras erva from the case of achos isha, v'isha l'chatolot kach mitzror erva Sarah? How do you know this was in the context of yibum? L'galos erva sa aleha v'chayeha. The aleha here linked to the yivama yavo aleha, right? So that's how the rabbis learned out Saras erva. So this is the key word aleha. So now we're going to have to figure out what Rebbe is going to do with the pasuk of aleha. So let's take a look. The Rebbe hi aleha my avile. What does Rebbe do with the pasuk of aleha? So mibayale lechidatanya, like we taught in the Brisa, or lechidatnan, really. Ein chayavin based in. Now we're going to get completely non-yibum discussion. Ein chayavin based in el davar shezdono kares v'shigaso chatas. So the based in, there's a halach of par helam davar shel tzibur. Based in rules incorrectly, everybody goes and sins. If it's rov of Klal Yisrael, then based in has to bring a special korban, a special bull, par helam davar. So what type of a sin did they rule incorrectly on that people followed them? It's a type of a sin that el davar says dono karet, that if you did it b'mezid, you would be punishable by kares. And if a normal individual did it v'shgaso, he would bring a chatat. Okay, so that's the type of sin based in is high for. V'chein Mashiach, and similarly the Kohen Gadol, it's using Mashiach because it's the pasuk, it's the pasuk in the Torah. The Kohen Mashiach mitachtav mi banav, okay, who brings a special korban when he sins, and also when he rules and sins. That's also only a type of a sin that you would be mazed if you did it b'kareit. Below b'avodot kochavim, there's also a special korban sibur, where a special korban when the Klal Yisrael sins b'shogeg by avodah zarah. So what type of sin of avodah zarah? Bet you didn't know there are different types of sins of avodah zarah. Only the sin of avodah zarah, el davar shechayivim os dono kares v'shigaso chatas. Only the type of sin of avodah zarah that if you did it b'mezid, you'd get kares, or worse, misa if there were witnesses. And if you did it b'shogeg, an individual will bring a chatas. When that type of a sin of avodah zarah gets done by the tzibur, they bring their special korban avodah zarah. Now, you're probably saying, I thought all avodah zarah was chayiv misa. Well, there is a type of avodah zarah that isn't a classic avodah, that is usher in a lav and not b'misa. If you take a look, Rashi says, Rashi 2 lines on the top, el al davar shechayiv no zono kares v'shigaso chatas k'gon zivuach v'kitur v'nisuch v'yishtachava. Okay, those are some of your classic avodot, slaughtering an animal to a pagan god, right? Burning incense, doing a libation, bowing down. Aval mechabek uminashek. If you do other forms that show your love, your fidelity, but they're not actual technical avodot, so lo, you would not be chayiv in misa or kares. You would only be over on a lav. So if the tzibur acted incorrectly there, they would not bring their special korban. So the basic idea here is the world of korbanot is pretty much limited. There are some exceptions, like an Olav Yored, but basically the world of chatas, whether by case of a yachid, which we're going to get to, or by a tzibur, or by bastin, or whatever, is limited to the types of sins that you get kares for if you do it b'mezid. Now, how are we going to learn that out? Allah is going to be key. Just if you're wondering, this is a sin that you get kares for, right? All the arayot end with genichrasu, okay? And the aleha is going to link us to a pasuk about a chatas, about a sin offering. So that's where we're going. That achos isha, because of aleha, doesn't tell you something about saras erva that we got elsewhere according to Rebbe. It tells you something about a korban chatas. Okay, so let's take a look.
was talking
Okay.
about like
Yeah.
Araya.
Yes, but what we're going to learn out from it is a general rule about Chayiv Kares. Okay, so that's about Tzibur and Mashiach Milchama. The Tanan Nami, we also taught a Mishnah by an individual. Any sin that you would get kares for if you did it b'mezid, and you'd bring a chatas if you did it b'shogeg, yochid mevi kispos ira. Then a private individual brings a chatas. It's a little bit circular. It's any sin you bring a chatas for, a private individual brings a chatas. Actually, the shigaso chatas is a little superfluous. What it really means is any sin that you would do if you did it b'mezid, you get kares. That's a sin that you are chayav a chatas for if you do it b'shogeg, and therefore the individual brings a female sheep or goat. Nosi, it's just going to tell you the animals, but the point is not to tell you animals. The point is to tell you this is the type of sin that you bring a chatas for, whether it's an individual or as a nasi or as a mashuach or as a kohen gadol, etc. So nasi maybe seir. So the nasi, the special korban of a nasi or of a king, is a male goat. Mashiach who based in mivian par. So the kohen gadol and the basin bring a bull. Ubeavodas kochavim, and if it was a sin of avodah zara, yachid nasi Mashiach mivian seira. So there's no difference here between individuals. Even a kohen gadol, even a king, all bring, or a normal lay individual, all bring a female goat. Tzibur mivian par v'seir. The tzibur for avodah zara brings both an ox and a goat, male goat. Okay, so we're not going to worry about the animals. These are basically psukim in the Torah. The basic point is, though, all of these korban chatats, whether individual or communal, whether about avodah zarah or other things, are only types of sins that you get kares for. And we're going to learn it out because of isha el achota. Okay.
Is an ox or a bull?
I'm sorry.
No.
What's the difference?
Male or female?
No, cow is female.
Wait,
What's the difference between?
Oxen and the bulls are the same.
No, I think a bull is a castrated ox,
Yes,
right?
an
I
ox
think
and
so.
a-
Steer is castrated.
Okay, I don't know what the difference between an ox and a bull is. You know? Right, I know, but ox and bull are two English words for
Ox, I
zachar.
think- Ox, I think is ox can be produced.
Really? I thought that was a bull.
That's a steer.
Okay, we're gonna find out from Charlie. Okay. Oh yeah. So what is the difference between a par and a shore?
Ox are often castrated, but it isn't automatic.
Aha.
An ox is a bovine trained as a draft animal.
Okay, so bull is probably a more
A
general
bull is
word.
a male bovine. And a
Got it. Okay, so bull. Shkoyach. Okay. Minani mili. Where do you know this from? The Tanu Rabbanan. The sin will be, they will be, it will be known, the sin that they sinned on. So Rebbe Omer, so what type of sin is it? Nemer Khan, here's the word. Aleha, Asher Chatu Aleha. The Nemer Alan Aleha tells you by Achos Isha. Notice it's the same Rebbe, because Rebbe doesn't use Achos Isha for Tsaras Erva. So he can use the Aleha by Achos Isha to tell you the type of sin that you bring the Chatas for. Nemer Khan 11 Nemer Alan Aleha. Mal Alan Davar Shechayven Al Zono Kais Veshigaso Chatas. The same way by Achos Isha, by the Arayot, it's something you get kares for. Now, we don't know you bring a chatas for. That's really the question at hand. So Shigas chatas is always just sort of thrown in there. But the point being, we know you get kares for the Arayot, okay, and for Achos Isha. So Afkan, so when it talks about bringing a chatas, we find out that a chatas is something that you get if you do a sin that you're chayiv kares. So the aleh means that Achos Isha serves as the basis, not for erva and tsaras erva, but for what you bring a chatas for. Ashkan tzibur. Now that's the pasuk by tzibur. It says v'noda chatas asher chatu aleha. Okay, Mashiach minayin. How do you know by the case of the kohen gadol? To see by Mashiach, it says ima kohen Mashiach yechata leashmat ha'a. It's sort of the blame or the guilt of the people if the kohen gadol sins. That's pshat. But let's see what we do halachically with the words lashmat ha'a. So it says harei Mashiach kitzibur. So the Gemara understands that the word lashman ha'am doesn't just mean the people have to bear this guilt if the kohen gadol sinned, but it means his sin is equivalent to the sin of the people. The sin of the people is, right, when all the people sin, which is the case of tzibur, which preceded it. What's the case of tzibur that preceded it? In the beginning, right, of Vayikra, right, when it introduces the chatas, first it starts with sort of if the higher people sin, and then it gets down to the lay people, as it were. So it starts with in kol adat Yisrael yishgu v'ne'elam davar meinei hakahal. So that's chatas hatzibur. I mean, for Chazal, it means that the Beis Din HaGadol paskind and so on. But anyway, it's chatas hatzibur. Okay, then that's the asher chatu aleha. So we've established that that's bekares. Then it says, Asher nasi yachata, v'asami kol mitzvos Hashem asher lo te'asena. Oh, we're going to get v'ashem, what in it? Wait, where's the Kohen Hagadol? Oh, I'm sorry. No. The first one is Kohen Gadol. Ima Kohen HaMashiach yachata la'ashmat ha'am. The second one is V'im dat Yisrael yishku. So by the Kol dat Yisrael yishku, we learn out that it's kares. The Kohen Gadol precedes it, and it's called equivalent to the sin of the people. So for him also, it's a similar type of a sin. It is kares. What? Yes, he has to bring his own korban.
So how is it the people's responsibility?
Whatever. That's so okay. The Gemara anyway is reading it in a more technical way. It's the same type of sin that people sin about. Okay. So I won't get into the theology of the psukim, but there's anyway. But okay. Harei Mashiach kitzibur. Now Yachid v'Nasi. How do you know about? So again, I'm sorry that people have to turn here. We're going to get them to put up a whiteboard. Where's it easy to be right on this side of the board? Or this side? Does it matter?
Doesn't matter.
I think this side. Sorry.
Easy for me to say.
So you have right. You have okay. Ima Kohen HaMashiach. Ima Kohen HaMashiach. Yachata v'ashmat ha'am. That's the first one. Then you have the case of Tzibur, which is V'im kol adat Yisrael yishku. And in this one it says Asher chatu aleha. Okay, so that's where we get the aleha, kares, okay, and then the next psukim is by the nasi, Asher nasi yechata, Asher nasi yechata, and then by the nefesh achat techata, okay, the nefesh achat techata. So, okay, we have nasi, nefesh, adat Yisrael, kohen HaMashiach. Okay, so this tells me karet. Ashmat ha'am tells me it's equivalent to the tzibur sin, so we get karet by the Kohen Mashiach. Where are we going to know it from? The what do you call it? From the about the nasi and the yachid.
Okay.
So 1 minute. All right. The nasi. So asya mitzvos. Yachid v'nasi asya mitzvos. By the yachid and the nasi, it says right. Achas mikol mitzvos Hashem. So the Asher Nasi Yachad, the Asa, Achas, Mikol, Mitzvot Hashem, okay? And by the Yachid it says, Achas, Mikol, Mitzvot. The Asota, Achat, Mikol, Mitzvot. So we got Mitzvot, and where else does it say Mitzvot? It says Mitzvot by, where are we? Ashita. Lam davar melech kahal. But where does it say mitzvot earlier? It says v'asu achas mikol mitzvot. V'asu achat mikol mitzvot.
Why did you need a third one?
What? This told me karet. This starts out with karet because of aleha. Okay. Ashmat ha'am got me this. Okay. And mitzvot here link to this mitzvot and get me to be able to apply it here because of mitzvot. Okay, that links it down. Okay, that's how we know it starts with a lamb. That's how we know everything is by a chayiv kares. Okay, the low avodas kochavim el davar chayvin al zdona kares v'ashigas chatas. Now similar by avodah zara. How do you know to limit it that way? Tzibur by avodas kochavim yalif me'ene me'ene. So there are. So here we get to not vayikra but midbar tetvav. Here are the psukim in by midbar tetvav. Thank you. So first we start with the tzibur. So first it starts with 22. Right? So Chazal say, what's kol ha-mitzvot? What is equivalent to kol ha-mitzvot? They say it's avodah zara. It's kol asher tzivah Hashem aleichem b'yad Moshe, minei yom asher tzivah Hashem v'halom dorsechem, v'ayai minei adam nestal lishkada v'asu kol ha'yachar b'makar, etc. Nefesh achas techata b'shkaga v'kriv eis bashnata lechata. Okay, so those are the psukim by avodah zara. Learn from Mikol Mitzvot. So where do we know it? So it says, so yalif me'ene me'ene, because here it says, where it says, so by in the Bamidbar, in the case of tzibur, here by avodah zara in Bamidbar, it says, me'ene ha'eda. And back here, and we can call it that Yishkuv and Elam Davar Meinei Chahal, is the elam davar me'inei hakahal. Okay, so you have einei here and einei here. So this is still the source, right? Allah gives you karet. We get it up to Kohen Mashiach because of Hashmat Ha'am. We get it to Nasi and Yachi because of mitzvot, and we get it to Tzibur of Avodah Zarah because you also have Me'enei here. So Me'enei gets you to Tzibur of Avodah Zarah. Okay, so that's Me'enei. Yachi, Nasi, Mashiach. Now, how do you know individuals, even individuals like a Kohen Gadol and a king, how do you know they also are limited to this type of a sin? Me'vi'im nefesh achat. Okay. Echad Yochid, the Echad Nasi, the Echad Mashiach b'matma. So it says one soul. The next case is V'im Nefesh Echad. So the fact that it says Nefesh Echad means any individual, anybody that's not Tzibur. So it includes. So Nefesh Echad means whether it is a Nasi, Mashiach, or Yachid. Anybody is a Nefesh Echad, and the V'im links it to the previous one. So it connects it. And if means it's a continuation of this theme. So if this is about karet, then this is about karet. Okay? So echad yachid v'echad nasi v'echad mashiach b'mashma, and vav mosif al inyan rishon v'lamei tachton mina elyon, and you learn the second case of the yachid by avodah zarah from the higher case from the tzibur of avodah zarah. Okay.
In the case before we have nasi and nefesh, because the last one was nefesh achat.
Yeah, you probably could have done it with the vav. Oh, there. Okay. Is it V'im? Did I write the pasuk correctly? Probably could have. It might be a case of Lamed Min Lamed, but it says, yeah, you wouldn't want to do that because then it's Lamed Min Lamed, the cartridge. Okay. Anyway, but it is a vav, I think. Yes. Anyway, that's that. Okay. Okay. For Abadan, Hai Svarminalahu. Oh, great. Now we know what Rabbi did with Aleha. He got a lot out of that pasuk about wife's sister. Okay. Now, if that Aleha is telling you halacha of Tsaras Erva, where do you get all of this from? Okay, the rabbis who use Aleha for Yibum, where do they get all of this from? From what Rabbi Yeshua read to his son. The Torah says in the case of Bamidbar, right? That's how it speaks about at the end of these cases of the Korban of Avodah Zarah. And then the next pasuk is Nefesh asher taseh biyad ramah et Hashem hu migadei v'nichrata. Okay, so that comes after these psukim of Avodah Zarah. It speaks about somebody who does it with an outstretched hand, with a raised hand, b'mezid, is cursing God. But there's a debate in Chazal whether megadef there means to curse, or whether megadef means somehow is like defying God by doing Avodah Zarah. So some of Chazal read that as Avodah Zarah, which is how this is being read. So we see right afterwards it speaks about doing Avodah Zarah and getting kares v'nikrusa. So huksha kolatar kula lavodas kachavim ma'avodas kachavim davar shechayvin al zdono kares fal shigasel chatas. So since that pasuk speaks about getting kares asher tasa biyad ramah, and the pasuk that immediately preceded it was Torachas Yelachem la'usebish kaga, one halacha for anybody who does a sin, the shogeg. Everybody who does a sin b'shogeg is the same halacha. So it's all similar to Avodah Zarah. It's all about a type of a sin that you get kares for. Great. So you don't need all these links. The Torah Chas gets you everybody, but it only gets le'oseh. It only gets you individuals. So it gets you this, it gets you this and this, but it doesn't get you, right, the tzibur cases, right? It doesn't get you the tzibur here, it doesn't get you the tzibur here. So it might get you all the individual cases, but it doesn't get you the two tzibur cases, because it says le'osebish kagar. Okay, it gets you Mashiach, it gets you Nasi by Avodah Zarah, by Shar Mitzvahs, but it doesn't get you tzibur. Okay, so Ashkan Yochid, the Nasi Mashiach, we have, so good, that will establish an individual, a king, and a Kohen Gadol, bein b'avodas kocham, bein b'shar mitzvot, whether Avodah Zarah, whether Shar Mitzvot, Torah Chas, it's all the same halacha, but Elat Tzibur b'shar mitzvos minalan. Where do you get the idea of a tzibur b'shar mitzvot and tzibur by Avodah Zarah also? So I'm sorry, I skipped the line. Mitzvos tzibur b'avodas kochavi minayin. I skipped down the line. Amar kra v'im nefesh v'yilamid elyon mitachton. We do the reverse. We start off by knowing this. Yachid is only by case of kares, and the v'im tells you that they're linked. So if they're linked, you can learn the top from the bottom. Okay, so here we start here and we go up to the case of Tibur. Can you figure out how we're going to get the Tibur over here? Be able to Zara? No, we're going to reverse the main A. The main A is going to link back there. So the flow reverses. Okay, it starts with the yachid, and then the flow reverses back up. Okay, so okay. Amakra v'im nefesh v'lamed el yom mitachton el tzibur b'shar mitzvos minalan. What do you know? Tzibur by shar mitzvos. Yalif me'ene me'ene. Okay, fine. So now we did all that. We now how everybody learns out that normal sins that you get karis for, you bring a korban for, whether yachid or tzibur. And how what Rabbi did with Allah and where the rabbis learned it out from. But we still haven't finished our accounting because now the rabbis use Torah Achat to tell you that. What does Rabbi do with Torah Achat? The Rabbi, hi Torah Achat, right? My Avilei keeps on going until we get to a point where we can sort of tie up all the loose ends. So Mibayele Lechatanya, like we taught in the Brisa. Lefi Shematzinu, Shechilek Akasu Ben Yechidim Lemerubim. So because I have to say something, that this whole enterprise of what do you do with this pasuk, what do you do with this pasuk, etc., is something you only get in the Stam in the Bavli. You don't get it in any of the Tanaitic works, right? Where in the Sifra, the Mechilta, where they darshan thing, nobody cares about what you do with the other person's pasuk. Okay, this is stafka, an enterprise of the Stam of the Bavli. Anyway, okay, so my Avidle, what does Rebbe do with Torachat? Mibayle lechatanya. Since we find by Avodah Zarah there's a different treatment of an individual who does Avodah Zarah and a tzibur who does Avodah Zarah. Merub yechidim beskila. Individuals get stoned. Lefikach mamona palit. And therefore, I don't know what's the exact therefore, but it's seen as less severe than sword, which is going to be like an ir nidachas. But also, therefore, and also, their money is not destroyed. Yeah, so it depends which way you go. So that's why the lefikach is funny. So let's bracket the lefikach. Okay, let's just say they get skila and their money is not destroyed. Merubim b'sayif lefikach b'mona mavad. And when the tzibur does it, ir nidachas, it's by the sword and their money is destroyed. So we see this difference by Yachid and Tzibur by Avodah Zarah. Yachal nachlok b'korbanoseihem. Maybe, therefore, there should be a difference when an individual does Avodah Zarah and a Tzibur does Avodah Zarah. Now, that's not this Tzibur. This Tzibur does have a separate korban, but that's meaning, because it says me'inei ha'ida, Chazal read it to mean that based in Paskin. What the Gemara is asking is, let's say a whole city worshipped Avodah Zarah. No based in. Everybody just worshipped Avodah Zarah, but they did it b'shogeg. They actually thought it was mutter, okay? So in that type of a case, if they did it b'mezid, it would be near any dachas. So maybe if they do it b'shogeg, the same way if they did it b'mezid, they have a special status. Maybe if a city does it b'shogeg, it brings a special korban. Okay, so Yachol nachlok b'korbanoseihem Talmud Lamar Torah Achas Yelachem one halacha which is written in the context here of Avodah Zarah, and therefore it's all the same. Doesn't matter if it's an individual or a city, same korban. So that's what he does with it. Right, exactly. So Maskifla Reb, but not this tzibur. Don't confuse us. We're not talking about this. This is dafka base. We mean whether you're an individual or whether you're 10,000 individuals and you're all in a city, it's the same korban. Same korban. Means same korban that an individual brings Avodah Zarah. Okay. Now, so that's what Rebbe does with Tarachas. Now, Maskifla, we're almost done. Maskifla Rebbe Chilkia Mehagronia. Rebbe Chilkia Mehagronia asked, "Time it because of Rahmana Tarachas Yelachem." You say you needed the pasuk of Tarachas to tell you if a city does Avodah Zarah, it's not a different korban. Halav ha'chiyava mina nechalek. If it weren't for that, I would have said that we should have a separate korban. My leisu, what korban should they bring? Leisu par. Now the Gemara is going to have a bizarre type of question. It's going to assume that if they were going to bring a different korban, it wouldn't be enough to be different than what a yachi brings by Avodah Zarah. It would have to be different animal than anybody ever brings for any sin. So the Gemara, I have no idea why the Gemara assumes that would have been the Havamina. So now it's going to say there are very few animals left that don't get brought for a sin. Okay? Leisupar, should they have brought not ox, but a bull? Should they have brought a bull? Tzibur b'shar mitzvahs u'demaisu. No, that's already something that the tzibur brings. Kispa, how about a sheep, a female sheep? Yochi b'shar mitzvahs u'demaisu. So that's a private individual. Seir, a male goat. Nasi b'shar mitzvahs u'demaisu. That's what a king brings. Par la'olah v'seir l'chatas. So maybe they should bring a bull for an olah and a seir for a chatas. Tzibur v'eretz kochavim u'demaisu. So that's a tzibur. That what tzibur does by Avodah Zarah. Delamai. So what should you say? Seira, a female goat. Yachinami hainu korbanot. That also works for a yachid by normal chatas. So what's left? Now it's funny, if you're keeping math, there are things left.
A
Okay.
bird.
So anyway,
You
well,
don't wanna
but
bring
even
a
if you forget bird, okay. So anyway, right. So anyway, if you look at the Tosos, my lesu, 3 lines before the end of that Tosos, the kashu, the lesu keveso ayo. What about a male sheep or a ram? Okay. Okay. Anyway, so and Tosos, and even if you had some other thing that was being used for, why didn't the Gemara at least even suggest it? So it seems like a pretty weird question. A, why we would assume it would have to be different than everything else, and B, you didn't use up all the animals. But anyway, so back to the Gemara, the Elamai. Oh, we just did that. So Itzrich, no, you still needed the pasuk of Terachas. Since when the tzibur paskins and by avodah zara and everybody follows it, right? That is that pasuk. Other parsha bamidbar. Maisu parla ola v'sir lechatat. They bring a bull for an ola and a goat for a chatos. So inunami. So maybe when a city sins by avodah zara, nesu ipcha. Maybe they would do the reverse: a sir laola and a par lechatas. Okay, which we don't ever. Do we ever have? Well, no, you have. Okay, anyway, fine. Okay, so inami, or I would say tzarich ve'en lo takana. Maybe they have to bring something different, but they can't because there's nothing left to bring, which again, so bizarre. Anyway, kamash malan. So that would have been the havamina. Okay, very bizarre. That was not the world's best question. Anyway, I'm a little baby Rebbe. Okay, we are done. So now we are done with what everybody does with everybody else's pasuk. And we're done with where I learn out Tsaras Erva, why I needed a pasuk by Tsaras Erva, where I learn it out from, and that Tsaras Erva only applies b'makom mitzvah. It doesn't apply shalom b'makom mitzvah. Take a breath. Now, are you done with your breath? Now we get back to the Mishnah and we ask a different set of questions. We're done with the source of Tsaras Erva that took us a good 7 daf. Now we're going to ask another question. In that whole list of the Mishnah, somebody is missing. Let us remind ourselves who is listed in the Mishnah. Mike, if you want to read us the Mishnah, who's listed? Okay.
The different opinions in the Mishnah?
No, there's no difference in this. Well, let's go read this.
נשים פותרות, צורותיהם וצורותיהם מחליצים יבמות סוף העולם, ואלו הם ביתו, בת ביתו, בת בנו,
right?
בת אשתו,
Okay.
and בת בנה.
Okay, well, no. So this is all a version of Bito. Okay. Then you have and Bat Ishto, yeah.
And then you
Bat Bina and Bat Bito.
Bita.
Okay, Bat Bito. So this is all a variation of Bito, either Bito or his here. This is sort of stepdaughter, okay, and granddaughter, right? Stepdaughter and step granddaughter. This is daughter, and this is daughter and granddaughter. Okay. Yep. Next set.
Then chamoto.
Okay.
Im
chamoto.
Ve'im
chamiv.
Then you have achoto.
Right. Im chamiv. So this is one generation up. Okay. So this is that Bito, daughter. This is chamoto, mother-in-law. Okay. Yep. And then you have.
Okay. Then you have
what?
Then you have achoto.
Achoto. Okay. So you see that, right? Down, one generation up. Lateral generation, right? Sister, yeah.
Was it achoto mimo? Then
Mimo, right? Because it can't be his brother, because then his brother couldn't be married. It can't be his paternal sister, yes.
Ve'achot imo.
Yeah.
Ve'achot ishto.
Right.
Ve'eshet achiv.
Okay. So that's variations of sisters. So though here we're going generations up. Achot imo, right? And achot ishto, but it's variations of sisters. Then Eshet
achiv meimo.
Right. Yep.
Ve'eshet achiv shelo haya ba'olamo.
Right.
Ve'kalato.
Haya. Right. And kalato. Which is his Eshet Beno, right?
Yeah.
So that's variations of people that he's related to through marriage, right? Somebody who is his relative's wife, his brother's wife, right? His mother's his brother, his half brother's wife, his brother's wife in a different variation, and his son's wife. Okay, so that's people he's related to, his relative's wife. Okay, so these are the 4 categories and the 15. Who's missing? Anybody notice that? There is somebody who's obviously missing. Mother. Why do we go to mother-in-law? What about mother? Why isn't his mother there? Now, how could his brother be married to his mother? Tell me, how could his brother be married to his mother?
if
half brother on the father's side, right? So whatever happened to that? They're brothers on the father's side. They have different mothers. So his brother could be married to his mother. Why not? So that's the question. Okay, let's take a look. Amalei Levi Lerebi. Amalei Levi Lerebi. So Levi said to Rebbe, "My Yuriya Tatani Tesvav. Why are you only 15? Listening to Zion, say 16." Amalei. So Rebbe said back to him, "It seems to me you don't have a brain in your head." This is how you encourage questions, right? By this type of a response. Okay. Whatever happened to no such thing as a bad question? Anyway, seems like a pretty reasonable question. So my daitra. What do you think? What should be mentioned? Imo, his mother. So Anusas Aviv, who is a woman his father raped. Now again, we pointed out, and I just continue to be, bothered by this, which is why when you talk about a case of of sex outside of marriage, does the Gemara need to describe it in the context of anusa, rape? Why could it describe it as mufuta? A woman seduced by his father, meaning just consensual sex. Okay, I don't know, but anusas aviv is a way of saying a woman his father had sex with who was not who his father wasn't married to. Okay, so now why is it assuming that mother? We've already described right here. You could have a case of You could have a case of why don't we do this? Rachel and Leah. So you have Yaakov. Okay, Yaakov and Rachel. You have Yosef. And you have Yaakov and Leah, and you have Reuven. Okay, so now, they're brothers, right? But they don't. Well, actually, that's probably because Rachel and Leah are sisters. But ignore that Rachel and Leah are sisters for now. Okay. So anyway, we'll have to make this somebody else. Make it stand in for Leah. Okay. Anyway, so Reuven can marry Rachel, right? Because he's not his mother. Okay, except that he can't marry his father's wife. Right. So it might not be his mother, but it's his father's wife. Even if Yaakov has died, he's forbidden to marry his father's wife. But there's a way he could marry Yosef. He could marry Rachel if Yaakov was never married to Rachel, right? If they were never married, so then it's not his father's wife. It's just a woman his father slept with.
So
he can marry it. That's anusas aviv, okay, which basically means, right? Not again, why it says anusa, I don't know, but it's a woman his father slept with, but not his father's wife. Yes.
In the case of Tatavi,
yes,
she is a zona, right?
No, you mean as far as a Kohen is concerned, or as far as the lav of lo yekdesha?
I don't know.
As far as the Kohen is concerned, not who has consensual sex.
Yes.
Is not as far as the Kohen is concerned. That their zona is only in somebody that's not tfisat kiddushin, meaning that it couldn't theoretically be married. Not that Lemaisa they weren't married. As far as the lav of lo yekdesha, that's a major machloket rishonim. According to the Rambam, that would be the lav probably of lo yekdesha. No. So because they didn't want to have the woman being over on the lav of lo yekdesha, so they had him raping her to make it better. Maybe it could be, I was thinking in a similar way. They'd rather have one of them sinning than two of them sinning. So this is sort of what you're saying. He's the one doing it. She didn't do anything wrong. Again, it's still disturbing for me to describe it that way, but that's a possibility.
That's a machloket.
Okay. So thank you. You're jumping ahead. So he says, where do you think you're going to get mother that is not already forbidden to the brother? That's not the father's wife. If it is a woman the father had sex with that wasn't his wife. So let's take a look. So my daitra, imo anusas aviv, the case of mother who was a woman his father raped, not his father's wife. So imo anusas aviv, that scenario is pluksat Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbanan. That's a debate of Rabbi Yehuda the Rabbanan, which Michael remembered that according to Rabbi Yehuda, a man not only cannot marry his father's wife, a man cannot even marry a woman that his father slept with. So Reuven would never, according to Yehuda, Reuven would never be able to marry Rachel. Rachel would either be his father's wife, or Rachel would be a woman his father slept with anyway, Anusa Savi. Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, that scenario would never happen.
And this is why it's a stupid question, because it's a machloket.
Yeah, because you should have figured this out. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay, but Pluksa Lokamari. So Mar says, Velo, are we not talking about matters of debate? For a Isser mitzvah, the Isser kedusha, we will find later that there are other women who are not arayot, but who might be prohibited for the brother to marry. What would that be? Isser mitzvah is what they refer to as forbidden midrabanan. Okay, so forbidden midrabanan is not interesting. That obviously won't have implications on the Torah level. But Isser Kedusha is more interesting. Isser Kedusha would be, let's say my brother is married to a woman who's a mamzeret. Okay, or right? Oh, so he was over on an Isser, fine. But now I can't marry, but the Kiddushin still is binding. Okay, you transgress, but the Kiddushin is binding. By an Ereva, the Kiddushin isn't binding. By an Isser Lav, an Isser Kares, there's no Kiddushin even if you try to do Kiddushin. An Isser Lav, you transgress, but the Kiddushin is binding. So my brother is married to a woman who's, let's say, a mamzeret. Okay, I now have a mitzvah yibum. I can't do the mitzvah yibum because I would be over on the Isser of marrying a mamzeres, right? But it's not an arayos. So do I still have, and if I were to Yibum, presumably it would be a binding Kiddushin. It's not like it all goes away. The potential of a legal Kiddushin still exists here. Okay, but I'm not allowed to execute it. So in that case, we say you do chalitza and you don't do Yibum. There's enough still there that you have to do chalitza, but because you're not allowed to execute it, you don't do Yibum. Rabbi Akiva says, we'll worry about Saras later, but Rabbi Akiva says, Rabbi Akiva treats Isser Lav like Isser Kares. And Rabbi Akiva says you're totally exempt. And another example of that is Rabbi Akiva says the offspring of an Isser Lav is a mamzer. We don't rule that way. We only rule the offspring of an Isser Kares. So he's saying, here's another case. According to Rabbi Akiva, we have a lot of other things we can add to this list, right? We can add all the Isurei Lavim, and we didn't. So you see that this list is dealing with matters that are contested. Okay, so of course it's a little different because you could actually say no, the list is listing those of them that aren't contested. Okay, but anyway, that's the Gemara's question. How about those? Depligi Rabbi Akiva Rabbanan. But so here's the question: not why isn't it in our list, but Biktani Bepirkin, Biktani, and it's in the Mishnah. The debate of Rabbi Akiva and the rabbis. Not that it's not in our Mishnah. That's fine. Our Mishnah is the uncontested group, but it's in a later Mishnah. So you see, Mishnayot are dealing with matters that are contested. So the Gemara says no. The Pirkin coming, that's the second parak. We mean in the first parak. In our parak, it's dealing with unanimous opinions. And therefore, we don't want to get into the Rabbi Yehuda about Anusas Aviv. We don't want to get into the Rabbi Akiva about Chayvei Lavin. We're dealing with unanimous opinions. So let's just read one more line. The Gemara says 1 minute. Okay, we've been having all these drashot of Tsaras Erva, right? And the other day we were saying it seems like everybody starts with the assumption that Tsaras Erva is a problem. We're going to find out that Beis Shammai has a big kula, or how do they call it a kula? It might be a chumrah because you demand yibum. But anyway, Beis Shammai says there's no category of Tsaras Erva. You still have a mitzvah of yibum or chalitza by Tsaras Erva. So this list is not universal because it started by saying Potras Tsarasayan. So the whole list is a Beit Hillel list. How can you tell me that we're only dealing with unanimous? The whole list is a Beit Hillel list. Beit Shammai doesn't hold of tsaros. So the Gemara says, right. So the Gemara says, Beit Hillel. The Gemara says, no, Beit Shammai b'mokom Beit Hillel in a Mishnah. All right, Beit Shammai doesn't count. So a Beit Hillel position is considered a unanimous. So that's why it's such a stupid question, because you should have realized that we're only dealing with unanimous opinions, and the issue of a Anusas Aviv is a matter of debate. Okay. Exactly. So we will continue with this tomorrow. This stupid question, which is not such a stupid question, we will continue with tomorrow. All right.
So besides the photo